Boys underscore
for whom J Bell tolls.
And I am Christian Williams at C Williams NFL, and this is the Devy Royale.
I do this day in and day out, all night long. Yeah. This all I think about. This all I care about. Y'all all I care about. Let's go, man. It's here. We televised, so you know we gotta show out. Yeah. They talking junk, so you know we gotta put them to sleep. Yeah. Let's go, man. Let's go. Don't play. We do this every day. We work too hard, day in day, like I told y'all. They don't do what we do. They don't do what we do. They never done what we did.
To the races, can they catch him? No, they can't. Touchdown.
Welcome to another episode of the Devy Royale, a member of the Going for Two family. Today on the show, we will be changing up our usual format a little bit so that we can talk about the biggest news in college football, and that is conference realignment. We got a lot of stuff going on. Texas and Oklahoma officially today asked to join the SEC in 2025, but many think it's going to be earlier than that. Conference, college sports looks like it's changing every day. It feels like, we're going to have this big, giant conference realignment. So we're just going to go through our thoughts, going to talk about how this is going to impact everything, the leagues, and just kind of general feeling. And I know Jeff's very fired up about it. He's been fired up in the group chat since this has all gone down. Nobody would respond to him in our college group chat, so he's even more pissed. So, Jeff, who do you feel like – what is your thoughts of this, the SEC getting these two schools, Texas, Oklahoma, and just go from there?
So where this all started, I go back to, I think it's just a perfect storm of everything that you could possibly have. You have name, image, likeness coming in and changing the compensation model for players. You have COVID that hit last year, and it really divided the schools that are in this for business or versus schools that are essentially in this for tradition and just a bonus to their school. And then you had talks about playoff expansion. And so all these things hit at the exact same time. And I think everything started from playoff expansion. And it's my understanding that the SEC, it's not Swafford anymore, but I can't think of who the commission is right now. But he drove everything for playoff expansion and really drove the head of the table when it came to these talks. And so I think what happened was you had these big programs that came together, the big conferences came together, and they talked about the expansion, and it got the wheels flowing. They knew the NIL was coming down the pipe, and they knew, I think COVID really laid it bare. You've got a program, again, I'm going to hit Ohio State because that's what I'm always going to do. You've got Ohio State that's fighting against Rutgers just to play football, and, in the Big Ten, they're treating every vote the same, and so there was a whole big thing last year where Ohio State, it didn't look like they were going to play for a long time. And they got a coalition together and essentially strong-armed their way into playing and changed the votes to get it to the necessary level that it was. And so I think these teams realized these issues are not going away. With the teams in, you got your Illinois or whatever it might be that's not going all the way in to improve their facilities, improve and be competitive, versus a team like Ohio State that's at the tippy top that's pushing. And so I think that Oklahoma and Texas looked at it and they knew that they left the rest of their conference behind. And really the other driver that I've heard about them was the Big 12 went to Fox and they said, we want to push this deal out, this TV deal out a couple more years. We're willing to give you a little bit of a discount, but we want some of the security to have this deal in place. And Fox told them, you're not worth what you think you're worth, and we're not going to extend the contract. And so I think that really, it's just been a perfect storm. And it's crazy that this all hit so fast. And I know in the group chat, we talked about oh, remember like when they were almost in the Pac-12, and so and that was. And 10 years ago, there was all these realignments that were going on, and then it seemed like everything died, and then it was all of a sudden everything hit. But again, I think it's just a perfect storm. Christian wrote a great article out on Fantasy Pros talking about the changes that are hitting college football, and I'd love to hear his input now.
Yeah, you hit a lot of that on the head, man. We're about to see just some revolutionary change in college football. I don't think this is your standard realignment. I don't think this is the same impact as Rutgers moving to the Big Ten. I think this is an entirely different ballgame. Regarding like the name, image, and likeness legislation, as soon as that dropped, and like you said, it's a perfect storm because they knew that this was coming, and plans to maximize revenue have had to have been in the works since what probably 5 years ago when all of the NIL stuff started coming up. You have to assume that that's when these schools started looking at options out, especially your Big 12s. I think you're going to see some mid-majors look to get into one of the smaller conferences because I think their trajectory, they want their trajectory to be similar to Texas and Oklahoma. It's not going to be, because what we're going to see is just a super conference is what I think. And you're going to have a ton of schools or a ton of players that go to these schools to compete in the best conference in college football. It's going to be very, very similar to professional sports. And I think ultimately it's good for the game. I think obviously right now for a while, I think we're going to have the Big Ten, we're going to have the SEC, and then we're going to have the fillers. I mentioned in my article that the NIL is pretty much making it, and this realignment is making it a Power 2. There's no longer a Power 5 because you've got the best teams from one of the worst conferences. No offense to the Big 12, but just definitely one of the worst conferences. You have the powerhouses leaving, and I think we're going to see that more and more. I think the Big Ten's probably itching to play these SEC teams so they can prove their worth and not sneak into that 4 spot in the college football playoff for as long as it stays 4. I think you're going to see those teams I think what the report was, Ohio State, Michigan. Who was the other Big Ten team that got an invite?
The report that I saw was Ohio State, Michigan were in talks with the SEC, and then Clemson and Florida State. But it was from a verified account, but it was one of these verified accounts that have 500 followers, and so I think it was one of those that you need to take with a massive grain of salt. But
for sure. But I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility. I don't think that's an immediate thing. But these two teams, I guess another thing that we should definitely talk about here is what this means for Devy. You've got players at Texas now actually playing some decent competition. And what I think we're going to see is the cream is going to rise to the top. We're going to see the cream of the crop players actually performing against players as talented as them. You can say, Jeff, I know you're big on this. Oklahoma beats up on teams all year. Ohio State, for the most part, has done the same thing. I'm sorry, Jeff. But they beat up on they beat up on teams that just have no business playing them, and now they don't get to. And ultimately, I think it's probably going to be bad for Oklahoma. It's definitely bad for Texas until they get their program turned around. Not that their program is in a terrible state, but I just see Texas as more along the lines of Auburn than Alabama. Whereas I think Oklahoma, especially if this were to go down this year, or if this goes down while Lincoln Riley is still there, I think they have a chance to compete. I'm done ranting. Kevin, what are your thoughts on this? I know there's a lot to process. So.
Yeah, but there's a ton of directions we can go into, and just listening to you guys, I'm trying to formulate, I think the super conference thing is a real thing. I did read something today. They talked about the SEC just deciding to go 24 teams and making their own playoff. Do you think that is a possibility where they just say, you know what, screw it. Hey, Clemson and Ohio State, and I'm going to throw in Michigan because I have to, at Florida State, you guys that are all over here, if you want to be a part of this, you can join our conference. We'll have a super conference, 24 teams. We'll make our own within our own, league. We'll do that. It's the championship. The NCAA can have their, UCF versus USC, or maybe USC joins a super conference or whatever in their national championship. And we see that kind of split. And kind of similar to what we used to have before, like this BCS, and I'll remember how they used to split the title back in the day. Like, I think the super conference could be a real thing. And the sad part is, because I've seen the argument, I would love a super conference. I think that's amazing. Like, I think that's an awesome idea. I know there's some loyalists out there that love, like, hey, passion, tradition. Like, I get that. But at the end of the day, it's about money. Like, this is all that matters to the NCAA. Like, that's what I think is funny, is like we found out during COVID, that was a good point by Jeff, a rare good point, that money rules all. Like, those top schools, they need all of that money. And in those middle schools, like, remember UAB, they shut down their program because of money a few years ago. Then they brought it back and they said, hey, we're coming back. And because of the outcry, like, money drives these guys. And that's the reality of, like, the schools. Like a school like Fresno State, where I'm at, they send me, and they need money every year, and they struggle to basically, they're supposed to pay for all their sports. They have 22 sports. I think is one of the most college sports teams in the country. If Fresno State, they have an equestrian team that cost $1 million to ship their horses to the East Coast. The football team pays for that, but the football team's not very good, and they've been losing out on revenue, and they're struggling right now. So, like, I think the biggest thing to take away from this is about money. And you know what's going to start happening, and we know what's going to happen, is these other teams are going to – Ohio State's itching. They have to be itching right now because they see what's going on, and they don't want to be left in the dust. And I think that's the key. Like, what happens now? Like, do we think the SEC goes there? Do you believe in the super conferences? Or we could even go to the Big Ten. Jeff, you're Ohio State guy. What is the best option for Ohio State? Do they stay in? Does the Big Ten now go grab other teams? I know there's some other ones out there, Iowa State, some other guys maybe that we talk about. What does the Big Ten do in the ACC, like these bigger conferences?
I think that Ohio State doesn't trust the leadership of the Big Ten, and I think last year was incredibly hard. Kevin Warren botched the whole thing, and I know that Kevin Warren and Gene Smith have a great relationship, but I think that it's my understanding there was some news like that Gene Smith's role was potentially changing. I know he was up for the Pac-12 commissioner, and so I think that there is. Structurally, I don't know that Ohio State feels the commitment to the Big Ten, and I think Michigan is going to move lockstep with Ohio State. They're going to do whatever they do. It's, and if you're going to do super conference, the reality of it is, like, Vanderbilt's got to go. You got to clean up some of these things in the SEC. So it's not like you can have 45 heavy hitters and Vanderbilt's just chilling, cashing checks. And so I think that it's going to be some hard conversations and some real realities on what programs want to do. But it's definitely in the best interest. I just feel like the inevitability that we're going to end up with one 24-30 team league. And you mentioned profitability, and the reality of it is even a lot of these SEC programs, like, they're not making money essentially. Like, there's a lot of loss leaders. I feel like some of the mid-tier programs, like in Arkansas or something like that. So I think it's one of those things that they're going to bring all the bargaining power. And the reality of it is too, so media rights drive almost everything in the money in terms of college football. It's not the gate attendance, it's all the media rights. And so if you're bringing all these powers together, all of a sudden, instead of Fox saying, we're fine having Ohio State and having the Pac-12 and we're going to split this up, and ESPN, you can do that. Now all of a sudden you're talking together and you're saying that you're buying the whole package together like the NFL. And maybe it gets split up like the NFL and some goes to Fox and some goes to ESPN, ABC, but you're having that same bargaining power together. And I do, talking about the players, one of the underrated things we've seen with the NIL kicking into place, these sponsorship deals immediately. And Christian brought it up great in his article. We talked about Bryce Young is almost over at $1 million already before he's even really taken a snap as Alabama's quarterback. The reality of the situation is you're going to have to figure out some sort of way. It's not great to talk about it and it's not great to feel about it, but the reality of it is you're going to have to find some sort of cost control on this because it's going to spiral out of control because we've seen recruiting in the past be the wild, wild west. So if you've got that going on, it's these programs are going to, for their best financial interest, figure out some sort of way that they're not cashing $15 million checks to an 18-year-old quarterback that has never even taken a snap and making double what the head coach of the team is making. So I think it's just consolidating power, feels like the natural step, feels like the place to go, and also just bargaining power as well as some cost control on that NIL.
Yeah. There's a point that we brought up in our messages about European soccer. It's something I was actually texting with Randy about as well. The interesting thing to me, we keep talking about a super conference, but when European soccer wanted to try that, they redacted that idea within 48 hours because there was so much pushback. And the reason that there was such pushback is it would have absolutely killed all of the smaller clubs that that's the best part of European soccer is it's pretty even. You've got your powerhouses at the top. It's very, very similar to the SEC or college football in general. But there's always those teams. There's those Cincinnati's. There's, I would liken that to like Newcastle or something like that being good, and a super conference would have obliterated that. And so translating that over to college football, what that means, what happens to all of the teams that get left out of the super conference? And I think that's something that should be considered, but won't be considered because, of course, all of these schools and the head of the SEC and the head of, I assume that like Big Ten commissioners, maybe not Kevin Warren, but I assume that the powers that be will all come together if that's the case. I would hope that they would consider the athletes at the schools that don't make money and aren't good. But it's just not going to go that way. They're going to want to maximize their revenue. Like you said, the TV revenue, it's going to be split over 4 stations. We're going to have college football on all the NFL off nights. You know what I'm saying? Like we're going to have football on all the time, I think, if this happens. And so it's going to be really, really interesting to see what kind of like morality or ethical reasoning these commissioners have when they're trying to build this super conference. Because like you said, Jeff, like the top recruits, then they are not going to any of those smaller schools. There's no way. They're going to go compete. They're going to make their money, and then they're going to show a skill set, hopefully, if they can get on the field, which a lot of them won't be able to, and hopefully get drafted and use some of that money that they earned in college. But in terms of like what the schools are going to be able to do for players with their name, image, and likeness, I don't have a ton of faith that they're going to be able to implement something that is cost friendly or cost controlling. I think it's mostly going to be on the marketability of the players. And so now you're going to see high school athletes trying to market themselves. It's you said the Wild Wild West. That's the perfect description for what is about to happen. Kevin, do you kind of agree with that mindset? Do you think it's going to get just out of control to almost a dangerous point?
Yeah, the thing I kind of go back to, it probably has already kind of been like that, but no one has been able to see it. Like, I feel like there's a lot of like stuff that, but again, that it does matter. The public perception matters. So if they see this, and in that, we all know college sports have been a farce. Like, we know that. Like, we know guys get paid. Like, that shit really happens. Like, everybody kind of knows that like things happen behind the scenes. But it's kind of like that. Like, I use the Christmas card analogy a lot. Like, everybody has a nice Christmas card. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's happy. But we don't really know what's going on behind those smiles. Like, mom is gonna beat dad's ass. Like, there's a lot of things going on there. And it's the same kind of concept, I feel like, with college football. Like, we know it's not squeaky clean, but it's like, whatever. Like, I remember the Chip Kelly. I can't believe Chip Kelly didn't get in trouble. Like, I remember UCLA article a couple years ago where agents, there's a known corridor at UCLA where no one can see the players. They go from the field to the locker room, and the coaches just don't go there. And the agents just sit out in cars and talk to UCLA athletes about contracts, sponsorships. And there was a big old article in LA Times, and it just went away. It's just still there. And it's just it's crazy to me. And I think the interesting point you brought up about the like smaller schools, like the Mountain West, I read an article today. They were talking about the Mountain West. the leadership of Mountain West actually figured the Big 12 was going to dissolve in 2026. So their TV deal with CBS, which was $270 million, goes away in 2026 because the Mountain West believe that they wanted to kind of have some maneuverability, and they think that they can get some of those schools to join their conference to where the Mountain West could be bigger. And it's funny to think about, like, they've been planning ahead. Like, they literally said the Mountain West believed the Big 12 was going away. I think the only people that didn't think the Big 12 was going away was Big 12 leadership. Like, they thought they were going to have that. I think what they thought was the Texas Longhorn Network was going to tie Texas in. And I think when Texas basically said, nah, that doesn't make us as much money as $1 billion deal at SEC, like that TV rights deal, think about that. The Mountain West get $270 million. What is the SEC rights going to be? Like, that thing is going to be massive, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And I do, the concern is certainly there. One, the top athletes are already going to the big schools. Yeah. And things are so, talent is more so than ever, I believe, getting stacked up at the very top. And so I don't think that's going to change anything. What you might see is, instead of everybody going to the Big 5 schools, then all of a sudden Auburn starts to recruit a little bit better. Tennessee starts to recruit a little bit better than what they've been, because they're not missing on those lower tier guys that are comfortable going to maybe an Iowa or something like that, however that shakes out. But I do think the reality of the situation is, especially if you end up at like 24 teams, then you've got 12 games weekly. And so you're loading up Saturday with those 12 games. And then I think that there's plenty of room for inventory for live sports. We've seen how valuable live sports is to television. And we've seen, the Max getting a deal already. The Mountain West already has a deal. The money's there, and I think the appetite for live sports would still be there. I think where it would hurt would be some of, again, like in Iowa, but Iowa's in Iowa, and they're fine, and they produce talent, and it's great, and Kurt Ferris has done a great job while he's there, and Iowa's never going to be in Ohio State. And I think that there's some hard realizations that are happening behind the scenes and that have already kind of happened, where it's no matter, the money's just not going to be there. The boosters are driving everything. That there's so much more money in Columbus, Ohio than there is in Ames, Iowa. And that's the reality of the situation. And there's so much more interest that's going to be driven out of this. But I think that there's plenty of room for a comfortable situation for those athletes that are there, that I think that they're going to be taken care of. It's just not going to be quite at the same level. But again, one moves up. It's not like we're inventing 250 extra college teams. The amount of games, Division I games, are going to still be the same. And if it becomes a different division, it's still going to bring eyeballs, and it's still going to fill up that live TV inventory is always going to be a thing, especially as streaming becomes a bigger deal. And they're always going to be, it's just the ad revenue is completely different on a live game. And maybe what you might see is the Super Conference completely takes over Saturday, or maybe the noon slot is still kind of open, but then, Friday night football or Thursday night football is pretty well spoken for, but Tuesday night football, Wednesday night football, you might start to see these Kansas versus Iowa games at that time. And I'm sorry for picking on Iowa, and I mean no disrespect to them, other than they beat Ohio State really badly a couple years ago, and so that's certainly not out of mind. But it's just the reality of that. And again, you're not adding extra games. The games are still there. It's just you're changing these matchups, and attendance has been a real problem for college football too. It's been, and you look at these schedules, and we get frustrated when we're going through our conference previews that there's like 3 games we're talking about, and imagine trying to sell tickets in that environment, or imagine trying to fill up a 110 seat stadium in that environment, especially if you're not firing on all cylinders and you're not a top 5 team, and you're in Michigan, things have been struggling a little bit, like trying to fill up that stadium against Western Michigan. It's a big task for some of these departments. And so I just think it's going to, in hopes, and I think one of the things that we talk about with the fantasy community is that a rising tide will raise all ships. And so as the attention grows in the fantasy community, as the attention grows with sites outside of ESPN, people start to look around for more things to watch. And there's generations that are ingrained in college football. And so it's always going to be there. But I just think, and Christian, I'm going to hit to you because you did a great part in your article talking about bringing new generations in with the video games and different things that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I added that section as I finished the whole article, and then I thought, man, what a missed opportunity to talk about the impact of the college football game that is returning in 2023. Um, this is, I'll tell you what, I supervise staff with a real job, and I interview kids 16 to 22 a lot for the job that I hire into. And I told someone the other day, I'm on a 5 interview streak where when I ask, what do you guys do for fun? They say, I play video games. That matters. We have an entire generation of kids that might not be into sports, but man, this new college football game looks pretty sweet. Uh, and then how is that going to impact the interest in college football, but also the impact, or how is it going to impact the interest in Devy fantasy football? I think it's a real thing. I think what we're going to see is a lot of players are going to be recognizable now. Even the old college football games didn't do that. And the reason it didn't do that is because there was no likeness. That you had guys that looked similar, and then you can download the rosters. Of course, people still do it on NCAA 14, but I just think that the realism of this video game is actually going to be incredibly impactful. And I know that's a crazy thing to say, but we play fake sports all the time. That's what fantasy football is, folks. It's the same thing as a video game, except we're just following real players. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing to keep an eye on. The one point I feel like we've gotten hung up on this super conference, which I think we should be. That's definitely down the road. But there is that rumor that Kansas and Iowa State are the 2 names being floated around for the Big Ten. Do you think that Iowa State specifically, because that's actually a program that's worth talking about? Sorry, Kansas. Do you think that they view a move to the Big Ten as, oh crap, we don't have a conference? Or do you think they view it as, this might get us into the super conference down the road? Let's jump to the Big Ten now before that is the case. Kevin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's where it gets weird. Like, what do teams need to do to get into that conference, right? Like, where are they going to go? Where are these conferences going to be? I think, yeah. I mean, right now it's going to be one of those things where they're going to eat their young. They don't care. They're not going to have any loyalty. Like, they're going to just go and just attack and try to survive. I think the key word these next few years is going to be survive until we see where it settles. And it's going to be best for the conference. I do agree that the thing that I wanted to know from you guys, the conference I think that's out there is the Pac-12. Geography wise, they're screwed and they haven't been great. The jokes are always out there about the Pac-12. Of course, I'm in Cali, so I got to give a little shout out to Pac-12 because I do like my Cali football out here. But, Pac-12 After Dark was good. I mean, has a good TV contract. They do okay. USC is talked about as doing that. Now, USC has the money to join as anywhere, really. They could afford to travel, I think, football-wise. But then what do they do with the other sports? Do you really want to see, Alabama versus USC women's basketball? Are they going to be able to afford that? Are they going to be able to travel, do those type of things? Like, I know football drives everything, but what the hell is the Pac-12 going to do? Like, they're going to add who? Like, from the Big 12 probably. They'll add a couple teams. I've seen some other areas in there. Do they add like a TCU? Do they try to add some of those teams to try to get revenue? Like, what do you think the Pac-12 does, Jeff?
I think we need to divorce with everything that's happening and the changes that's going on. I think we need to divorce how we've thought about things traditionally. And we've thought about the conferences moving together. And one of the big things with the Big Ten and going into the Pac-12, the research and the money in the Big Ten is massive. And the research money is never talked about, but I know last year I'm pretty certain it outweighs football and just I'm 99% sure that these universities are making a lot more money off research and being a university than football. So why does everything need to move with football? And so if you're just separate football out of, you got Oregon and USC and UCLA and whatever it might be, just take out the football program from being in the Pac-12, and then you've still got the infrastructure. You've got everything else in the Pac-12, basketball and whatever else it might be in the Pac-12, but you divorce Ohio State football from the entire athletic program, and you're dumping these 25, 30, 24, whatever it might be, football programs into one thing, and you still have the infrastructure. You still have these universities working together with the research and still having these institutional ties that go back over 100 years. And so I think that's where it's going to be, because that's the reality of the situation is that's the business in sports, is the football. And so I think that we need to stop thinking about just traditionally that everything's got to move together. And if Oregon were to join the Big Ten, and Oregon wrestling would have to travel to Columbus, Ohio on a random weekend, and it just
fair.
doesn't make sense to be able to do it that way. And I would like to hope that that's happening, that these universities and these decision makers are having those high level of thoughts, and I have a little bit more faith in the universities to do this as opposed to the Big Ten leadership to try to move things like together, because it's just, we've seen in the past, and it does seem like there's a reason why the SEC is getting Texas and Oklahoma. And the reality of the situation is this is something the Big Ten should have been working on for the last 10 years. Once Texas A&M left to go to the SEC, they should have been buttering up Texas and Oklahoma nonstop for the last 10 years. And so we right now, it feels like we're at a crossroads, and we're either going to consolidate down to one, or if there is two, you hit a great point on the Pac-12, because the programs that I'm looking at right now are Oregon and USC. And I think that the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have a very long history of working together. They've got the Rose Bowl, and these conferences move in lockstep. And so if there starts to be rumors and whisperings about Oregon and USC joining the Big Ten, then I have more faith about Ohio State and Michigan staying there if they were able to do that. If they're just bringing in Kansas and Iowa State, I think that's thinking small potatoes. And I think that tells me that they're basically just kind of treading water for a little bit. And then I have more thoughts that we are going to see one consolidation into one big conference.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to bring up the point that you made, Kevin, about how we have to get rid of Vanderbilt. We have to get rid of the dead weight, essentially. And what better way to do that than to have the one conference? You bring in USC, you bring in Oregon, you leave all the other teams over there. You take, Ohio State, Michigan, and I'd say probably Penn State, maybe Michigan State. Those last two would be lucky. But then
Penn State, yes, Michigan State, no.
that's kind of how I feel as well. But then the problem with that is there are so many good SEC teams that have an argument, and then your main conference then is just a couple of hand-picked teams or schools from other conferences playing against the SEC, which is kind of what we're looking at now. And I think that's where teams would be hesitant to do that, because the SEC teams have been playing each other for years, and there is that storied history. And then Ohio State, USC, Oregon are just inserting themselves into that. And I don't know how lucrative that would be for them outside of the TV deal, right? Because then you look at how much money did Ohio State make from making the national championship game this year? Are they pretty much inhibiting themselves from doing so by joining this conference? I don't know that they would look at it like that, but a team like Michigan should look at it like that. A team like USC and Oregon, like if I were USC and Oregon in that case, like you have to definitely weigh how much that revenue matters. Granted, we are talking billions of dollars. It probably matters, but the more teams you add to that, the less share there is. And so if I'm USC, if I'm Oregon, I consider the ramifications, what that actually would mean for me. And while I would love to see just a conference with all competitors, I think we're going to keep the Kentuckys and the Vanderbilts and the Iowas. Like, I think those teams might not be necessarily in the one big conference, but I think you could see, like you mentioned, Jeff, the two conferences. And I don't know. I guess I don't know what that landscape would look like. Kevin, first of all, sorry for interrupting you.
No,
and then what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you made all good points there. While you were talking, I'm thinking of like what does this do to Devy and C2C? Like, what does it do to, like, I think for Devy, like when you're talking about those teams like Auburn or even like Kansas, Iowa State, like, I don't think this changes Devy as much. Like when you're thinking of like what those schools will do, I think they'll figure out a schedule. They'll try to wrap around. They'll do their best to survive, but they'll never compete for a championship. Never. Like, I don't really think they ever compete now, but they still have that facade of like Big Ten championship, those type of things. Like I do, and so kids may go there and stuff. I don't think it changes a lot for Devy in my perspective in terms of like players going to those schools, because I think they're going to go to the big schools. You still draft them because you don't need to worry about them. And I'd love to hear you guys' opinions too, but I think if this happens, I think it changes campus to Canton bad, like in a negative way. I don't think it's a positive. I think, yeah, you can draft some of these younger guys and you can kind of get them. But if they're waiting 3 or 4 years to play, or if they're really behind that depth chart, I think it changes the campus to Canton format that people are really starting to kind of get behind. I think it's still niche. I don't think everybody wants to draft like the third string running back at Central Michigan. I do, but I don't think everybody does. But I think that when you're looking at it from that perspective, I think it will have an impact on campus to Canton leagues and that whole niche of it, because where do these teams play? Who do they play if the schedules are all jacked up? Like, it is already hard to set lineups in campus to Canton because of schedules, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. Like, I think that will be the biggest impact, in my opinion, in as far as like Devy trying to like talk about that. I think Devy, whatever, I'll draft the top 5 guy. It doesn't really matter to me. But the C2C thing, I think, is a big deal, right, Jeff? Like, does it feel like that? Because it's already a mammoth thing. And now you're jumping into like schedules, people, transfers, and the transfer rules we haven't even talked about. Like, they can now, are they going to be able to transfer now? Like within a year, is the COVID thing over? Or now if they're not playing at this super conference SEC thing, now they can leave? Or what's going to happen?
Is this the part where I make everybody mad?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think C2C is a great, fun game, and I think there's zero scalability to C2C. You can't bring in casual people to draft 45 rounds in 110, 120 teams. There just isn't. I love the game, and I really enjoy the way it's set up. But if you're going to scale this and it's going to become anything, it needs to be consolidated, and it needs to feel more like. The reality of the situation is we love dynasty football, but dynasty football is a sliver of the fantasy football industry. And so if college football fantasy were to become anything, it needs to be consolidated at 30, 40 teams, whatever a super conference would be. And you need to have the ability of Phyllis down in Tuscaloosa can have her team that's got 15 guys on it. And that's the reality of what is scalable, because you just can't expect anybody outside of the diehard to get into one of these drafts and to go this deep. And so if it were to become a real game that people can get behind and get involved, you've got to be able to bring these casual fans in. And I think that's one of the struggles of the space, where people need to feel like they go in the niche to be heard because that differentiates them, but then you're stuck in the niche. And it's like you go in, there's no growth there. And so it's like a place that you can hone your craft and make a name for yourself in that niche. But like to be able to scale that, it's not there. And so it can be exciting for the future of college fantasy football if we get to the point where you've got 30 teams in a super conference and you've got you're just playing your 30 team, whatever it might be. And the reality of it is you need to have the 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. It's flex that is boring, that down the hall they play in the office pool, because that's what is really, that's where the size is and the scalability is. And so it changes it fundamentally. And certainly that game can still exist. That game can definitely still exist, that you want to go that deep, just like with dynasty football exists. But it's make it mainstream, it's not going to happen. And I love it, and I'm sorry if that shatters some bubbles out there, but that you're just never going to get any sort of scalability on Nevada's 3rd wide receiver. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, we're degenerates. I think we can all agree that we love this. Um, I I've never had more fun than drafting my C2C team, even if it took 4 months. However, I think to your point, Kevin, I think what it does is it introduces a whole new game where we stop playing C2C and we start playing redraft college fantasy football.
Yes.
And I think redraft is the key word there, because I think with the depth, so Alabama's depth chart in this super conference, you're going to have 5 top recruits. They have it now. They have 4 top 50 receivers. Expecting that to translate into this long form fantasy football league, I'm kind of in agreement with Jeff to a point where you're gonna miss so much that it's gonna become not fun for the people who aren't diehards like us. If you do redraft, you have a pretty good sense. People draft at the same time. Like right now, we're heading into NFL fantasy football drafts. All of my leagues are getting amped. We're gonna have the same thing for college football, I think, where we have clarity. We know the players that are playing, and then we can brag about hitting on the sleeper Ajayi Hall, right? We drafted Ajayi Hall in the 12th round of a redraft college fantasy league, and we get pumped because we listen to C2C guys and degenerates like us who talk about kids like that. I do think it fundamentally changes how C2C is played, to your point. I think, honestly, I think what you see is more, you lean on the college production, right? So you go to those smaller conferences and you stay away from the super conference, which sounds counterintuitive, but because there's so much talent within those 32 teams or 24 teams, it's going to be so difficult to identify it. Granted, you guys should go read my article on Fantasy Pros about how the NIL makes it easier, because you can follow the money. You can kind of see how brands are viewing these players, but that ends at a certain point. And so it's muddy, man. It's as muddy as any situation that I've ever seen with college football.
Yeah, I just want to slide in and get C2C can still exist as it is, and it's a very fun game. And so it's just like Dynasty football, where it's you've got your crowd and you've got your people you can play it with. But again, it's just the scalability is never going to be 120 teams with 45-man rosters and everything locked in. It's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up and move on a little bit. But I go back to this, like the redraft stuff is important. I think the college redraft thing is there. I go back to my brother, who's not someone who, he's in his 40s and he plays fantasy, but like he sent me a text today and he's like, hey, I need some help with who to draft. And I was like, okay, do you want sleepers? Do you want this? He's like, bro, just tell me who to have and draft. He's like, just give me the top 10 dudes that I should do in the first 10 rounds. I don't care about any of that crap. And I think sometimes as analysts, we forget, but like, he's the majority. They do not care about, like, we're not looking at some third string guy in the Colts or going over like all these different guys. Like, and I think that's, and he likes college football, but when he hears what I do, he thinks I'm a nut job, because he's like, hey, that's not even like close to it. I just watched Texas on Saturday. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. So like, I think that's to a point. Like, sometimes we forget in this space that 90% of the population is like, bro, give me the love-hate list, please, that Matthew Berry puts out. That's all I need. Like, I don't need anything else, because that's who I am. So college football is going through a makeover, and we're going to be on this, and we'll be talking about it, I'm sure, the rest of the year. It'll be interesting to see if Texas Oklahoma stays for 3 years. I have a hard time seeing that they're going to be there, but we'll see. I know they're going to be sued up the ass if they don't. So we'll see how that goes and what that looks like. But we got to move on. We are going to continue our games. We're going to do everything that we usually do. It's going to be a little bit of an abbreviated portion. And I think we have the sportsbook rundown first. So, Jeff, why don't you break us into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, this show is broken down into 3 different categories. And so we play for the turnover chain of immunity that Christian is wearing. And he is the sportsbook rundown guy. So, Christian, what games do we have on tap for this week?
I was trying to get to this to spin. It wouldn't spin. That was embarrassing. So the sportsbook rundown, again, can't wait for actual football to be on. But we asked when the Olympics started last week. They're here, baby. Let's go. We've got some Olympics to talk about. We'll talk through an MLS game and an MLB game. So let's start. We'll end with the Olympics. Let's start with MLS. Los Angeles FC versus Minnesota. Don't have a line. We're just going to blindly pick.
Yeah, I'm going to go LA because California.
I'll go Minnesota because Midwest.
Okay. And I love when you guys do this. So then I have no guidance whatsoever. I'm going to go. I didn't even know Minnesota had an MLS team. So I'm going to go LA. I don't know if Minnesota's new. I don't follow the MLS. I need to. Go Crew. All right. Major League Baseball, Baltimore Orioles at Detroit Tigers, two really bad teams. This game will be played on Friday. That is the game that we are going to look at. Kevin, who you picking?
Yeah, I hate AJ Hinch, so I can't pick. I'm not going to be able to pick the Tigers, so I'm going to go the Orioles, even though they're bad. But I can't do Hinch. Hinch's a jackass.
I hear you.
As you can see behind me, I'm not going against the Tigers. So Tigers.
Oh man. Both these teams pretty bad, like I said. And so as a Guardians fan, a newly invented Guardians fan, I am going to have to pick the Orioles because I have bad memories of the Tigers growing up. Sorry, Jeff. Okay, now that we got through
the glad we gave you bad memories.
Yeah. One of my first baseball memories is actually the Tigers World Series. I mean, not the first baseball memory, but one of the most relevant, I guess. All right, Olympics. We've got.
Than you.
I know. I'm the baby of the show. All right, Olympics. So we've got a couple of swims from Katie Ledecky tonight. I believe the first swim just happened, but I don't know what happened. Did either of you two see what happened?
I've been ranting about.
No, I haven't watched Olympics, so I'm out on this one.
I just knew that the swim was supposed to air at 9:40, and so Katie Ledecky versus the field for, we'll call this the 200 meter because I think that was the one she was the favorite in. So, Kevin.
Well, I feel like I have to go Katie Ledecky because I feel like if I don't pick her, I'm un-American. So I'm going to go Katie just because I can't go the field against an American in the Olympics.
True.
I am also under the same analysis going with Katie Ledecky.
I will be the un-American person simply because I know she lost her first, I think it was 100 meter or whatever she swam before. I know she lost. And so I think what we see is a lot of Americans getting the yips right now. I think they watched the new Ted Lasso and they said, I want some of those yips. And so I think she's gonna lose. Sorry, America. But we have an opportunity to fix that here. The basketball team plays Iran. The U.S. basketball team plays Iran. The spread is 40 points. Kevin, do you think they're going to win by 40?
They should, because Iran, I think, is the worst team in this entire division. I'm going to say over 40. They're going to come out and whoop Iran's ass. They are built terrible, though. So, it wouldn't surprise me if they keep it under 40. But I'm going to say over 40, dream team special, and then take out Iran.
Over 2. And I completely agree that this is the worst Team USA that we've seen in, I don't even know when since before NBA players could play. But they'll win this game.
I would actually argue that when it was just college players and high schoolers, they were even better than this team.
Probably. You're probably right. I mean, when your two best players hate each other and you got JaVale McGee on the team, I don't even know how that happens.
Disgusting. Yeah, gross. I can't believe they built that roster the way they did. Okay. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about is golf. Olympics? Olympic golf?
Olympic golf.
Okay. Didn't even realize that thing, if I'm being completely honest. So you guys are going to win this one. All right. The golfers that we're picking from, Justin Thomas, Victor Hovland. What's Mr. Matsuyama's first name?
Hideki Matsuyama.
That's what I thought it was. But I didn't want to mess that up because that would have been embarrassing as well. Rory McIlroy and then Paul Casey. Kevin, who you picking?
Can we just say John Rahm is the unluckiest dude in the world, getting COVID twice? So he got knocked out of the Olympics and then he got knocked out of the tournament. Like, that poor guy just can't catch a break. But I'm going to go, you know what? Out of all these guys, my favorite golfer here is Hovland. So I'm going to go Hovland. He's been playing okay. And we'll see. Maybe he'll take home a medal.
I'll take JT out of this one. Go America.
Yeah. Oh, well.
That's who I was going to pick, but I feel like I can't now. Did I ever say – I don't even think I said – I went with the under for the basketball because they're bad. I don't even think I said that. I'm sorry. And then for this, I'll go – I feel like you guys laughed at me when I picked Spieth, and then I ended up, I think, winning that one, even though he didn't win. So please laugh when I say Rory. I'm going to say Rory.
Good for you.
Thank you. All right, that's it. That's sports book rundown. I can't wait for football.
All right, so we are going to roll with prospect poker. Today's going to be a little different. So the rules of the game are simple. We are going to play poker, actually, while we go over these guys. We have the cards out and everything. But before we reveal that, we're going to talk about our favorite and least favorite expansion moves. We have a king of diamonds, 9 of hearts, and 6 of hearts on the board right now. And I believe Christian goes first. So what was your favorite expansion move?
I took a different approach because Jeff had taken some good ones. And so I looked at this as more like just a realignment, reform. And I said the introduction of the AAC. It's one of my favorite conferences to actually watch. It's not Power 5, really. It's not great football all the time. But what you get is some fun football players that end up, I feel like, having a solid shot at NFL stardom. So when they implemented that, that's my favorite. I enjoy those teams.
All right. So Christian's flip. Ooh, an ace of hearts. He coming out hot. So my favorite move was when Nebraska went to the Big Ten. And so that was before Rutgers and Maryland. So it felt like the Big Ten was actually doing something when they brought in Nebraska. And certainly it has not panned out the way that you would hope. Nebraska is not the Nebraska that I remember as a child, but it still felt a very, very big move, and it felt like the biggest chessboard piece that you could have grabbed at the time. And so that move to grab Nebraska and bring them into the Big Ten, already it's been 10 years, and that's wild to think, but it's my favorite expansion move. My flip, an ace of clubs.
Yeah, I can't wait to get that 2. I can't wait to get my 2 of clubs I'm going to get. My favorite was actually is interesting. I like Texas A&M going to SEC. I thought it was a great move for them, and they were obviously on the forefront of it. They built that program up. They had the money. They kind of got rid of that little brother syndrome from Texas. Now Texas coming back. So if you want to have some fun, and I'm going to tell everybody out there, find a Texas A&M like message board on Twitter and Texas right now. They are going at each other, talking about little brother, big brother, you're following us. No, you couldn't handle it. Like, it is. I spent like 10 minutes I spent a lot longer. I spent like 30 minutes of my time today just reading the comments of it. Fantastic work out there, Texas Aggies and Longhorns. But Texas A&M I thought was great because they got on the forefront. They built up that program to who they are, and I think that they've done well with it.
All right, Kevin's flip, a 5.
Yeah, that's great.
Nothing.
That's awesome. All right, least favorite. Christian, what you got for your least favorite?
Yeah, again, I went with a different route here. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to take a shot at Zach Wilson. And so my least favorite is when BYU went from the Mountain West to independent, because it doesn't make sense. You know what makes sense? Notre Dame being independent, and they can't even really make it work. What doesn't make sense is BYU being an independent school, because it really doesn't do them any favors. I think that's a team that needs a conference to survive and survive well. Shout out Tyler Algier, I guess. That's it.
Tyler Algier is the most overrated Devy prospect I've ever seen the last 2 weeks. I don't know what is going on. Tyler Algier is now a top 5 guy, apparently.
Remember when people liked their show?
No, I don't.
No.
That's not on brand. Listen, we're going to tell the truth. And Tyler Algier is not. What is happening in the world? I love some guys that are saying it, but like, how come if one dude tweets out something about Tyler Algier, all of a sudden now it's everybody's tweeting out things about Tyler Algier? Like, come on, like let's put the blind. Like, stop. Like, just look at the prospect, not the analyst. Sorry, rant. I'm done.
I knew this would incite that.
2 clubs from Christian.
Yeah, not great.
My least favorite, there can only be one, and it is the Rutgers move. And I can sell myself on Maryland. You bring in the Under Armour money and the DMV area, and Ohio State recruits pretty well down there, and so that's a good move for the conference. But Rutgers, and just to be honest with you, I know it's supposedly brought in the New York area, but I feel like there are more Ohio State and Michigan alumni living in New York City than Rutgers people that care about anything. So did it really bring in the New York market? I think that was really, if this falls apart, if the Big Ten falls apart, I feel like that is the beginning of the end on that move, because there were some rumors about I know, and I'm sure it's probably Ohio State message board rumors about Miami potentially, or some other programs. Georgia Tech might have been a nice little program to target, but that Rutgers move, and I just hate it. And I got a 5 of hearts.
All right, give me that pair, baby. Just give me that pair. All right, my least favorite, and it's funny because Jeff just said why it was a good thing, but Maryland, I hated it probably because of. To me, it was a basketball thing because I loved watching Maryland playing in the ACC with Duke and that whole kind of concepts and like that. I just don't think they don't fit. And I just don't like it. I don't like and even when you watch the Maryland versus Michigan, it just feels weird to me. Like, oh, that's great. Like it just never felt like a good fit. I love the basketball side of it too. Like I hated what the Big Ten did. Hated it. Like just absolutely hated it. Now give me a pair. That's what I want right now so I can win.
You got it.
You did. Look at that.
I manifested that with my Tyler Algier hate.
Yes, you did.
Apparently.
So now we have to determine blackjack, right? So I won the
play blackjack.
Did you win? The robot did not tell us who won last week, so I apologize on that.
Well, I picked the Bucks and I picked Spieth, so I think I did win.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so our last game, we're going to play a little bit of blackjack. And the way playing the blackjack, I don't even know what I'm doing. Setting up for poker here.
That is the quote of the show. I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. What is happening right now? We're playing blackjack trivia, and we're just going to try to win.
C2C, please don't hate me. I love you guys, and your game mode's great, and I feel bad, but. Yeah, it's really cool what is happening over there. Anyways, so the way we're going to play is we're going to flip out and we're going to see where we stand. Christian's flip a queen and a 2. Ooh. Kevin's throwing up an ace. 18. Sitting on 18. And I've got a 3. I'm sitting on 12.
I like it.
Okay.
I like it.
So Christian can go first. So Kevin, do you have a trivia question for Christian?
I do. I have an Olympic trivia question because Christian likes the Olympics. Okay. There's 2 countries that have not missed one of the modern day Olympics. So what 2 countries are
those? So I'm just gonna the United States. Is that one?
No, that's wrong. They missed.
I didn't think so.
Well, I thought you'd get the easy one, which is Greece, because that's where it started. So they go every year, no matter what. That
makes sense.
And in Australia, actually. Australia.
Okay. You busted, bud.
Did I?
You busted. Yeah.
Well, you would have.
Yeah. It's too bad.
Been pretty good. Okay. So somebody have a trivia question for me?
Sure. I've got one. Who are the last 2 teams to drop out of the SEC during the 20th century? Taking it back to your time period, Jeff.
Last 2 teams. I feel like it's probably like, I don't think it's the Citadel. It's somebody random like the Citadel, but I don't think it's the Citadel. I'm sure I'll just say Georgia Tech and Virginia. I don't know.
What you got? One Georgia Tech and Tulane.
So, yeah, I knew Tulane. I knew it. Oh man,
I thought you were gonna get that.
Okay, so I'm at. I don't know. I'm gonna have to hit again. So somebody hit me with another question.
Kevin, do you have one?
If you have one, go ahead.
All right. Shout out. Never mind. I can't say that. What school did Buffalo Bills middle linebacker London Fletcher attend?
William
Also
and Mary.
No. John Carroll.
No, that's right. John Carroll in Cleveland.
Yep.
I bust. I'm sure.
So Kevin,
Kevin is the new champ.
That's good.
About time. I finally pulled a W.
Let's throw some. So all right. So we forgot to do this last week. You go first, Christian.
Yeah.
All right. You've got a piece of paper that I left in there that didn't have a name on it. Paul Casey is yours, and
Sounds
mine
good.
is. We got to figure out. We got to do some punishments. We got to start doing and I got Matsuyama. So we got some golf going on.
Sweet.
So Kevin, why don't you hit us with a little bit of FaceTime?
Yeah, I'm not going to be inspirational this time. I just want to talk about a prospect I really like. His name is Kojo. I think it's Kojo Antwi. He's out of Georgia. He's a number 8 wide receiver recruit in the country. 6'1", 185. His prep school stats right now: 92 receptions, 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns. He's really good against press. He's fast. I think he's one of the best recruits in a down. I know some of these guys haven't got the 2025 wide receiver class is interesting. It's not as top heavy as you would expect. Like it's a little down, to be honest, with some of the receiving cores we've seen the last couple of years. But this kid Kojo is really good, and unfortunately, he just declared to Ohio State. So he's going to the Buckeyes, which sucks because all of these athletes that I keep propping up keep freaking committing to the Ohio State Buckeyes. But Kojo's legit. He's going right into that thing. He's going right into the wide receiver U at Ohio State. Like, he's legit. He's someone that I was on May 4th, and then he just like a couple weeks ago, he just committed to Ohio State. So keep an eye on him, especially in your Devy leagues. If you can draft high schoolers, if you can, you're really degenerate. But if you're like me, where I wait till they're at least freshmen in college, he's a good guy to keep an eye on because I think he can shoot up draft board or the prospect boards next year.
Good stuff.
So next week we will be back on August 3rd at the 9:30 slot on the Going for Two network. Until then,
I'm Kevin Coleman at DuBois_22.
I'm Jeff Bell at For Whom J Bell Tolls.
And I am Christian Williams at C Williams NFL, and this is the Devy Royale.